science enthusiasts. My name is Jason Zakowski. I'm a high school chemistry teacher and a science communicator, but I'm also the dog dad of Bunsen and Beaker, the science dogs on social media. If you love science and you love pets, you've come to the right place. Put on your lab coat, put on your safety glasses, and hold on to your tail. This is the Science Podcast. Hey, thanks for tuning in this week. We hope you are happy and healthy out there. It's a busy week for our family. If you're listening to this when the podcast comes out, which is Thursday. Thursday is X Games at my school. It's something the leadership kids put on. It's a half day of fun and games before we get into crunch time for finals, getting ready for the end of the year. And they've basically voluntold, the school has voluntold me I'm putting on a bunch of science demos and explosions. So I have to prep all of that all day Wednesday, but it'll be a lot of fun. Chris and I are really excited to get going. We've started building the Text from Bunsen book with all of our content. It's just we have to work at it as a team, formatting it, as well as getting ready probably end of July to record it as an audio book. And finding the voices for Bunsen and Beaker has been hilarious. Our patrons, aka the Paw Pack, are really helping us out with some of the voices. Okay, on the Science Podcast this week, in science news, we have to dive deep, or maybe to the singularity, about the black hole news that was announced last week. It was all over social media. So you know what? Let's talk about the black hole. In Pet Science, I've got an interesting article about cannabis poisoning and pets. Because of the amount of places in Canada and the United States that are starting to decriminalize/legalize marijuana, there's more pets getting poisoned by it. So what's going on there? And our expert guest is Ashley Parks, an environmental scientist. We're going to talk about all things the environment, which is a fascinating and very topical discussion. Hey dogs, why did the black hole lose so much weight? Well, pretty simple. It ate light. Okay, that's a good one. All right, on with the show, because there's no time like science time. This week in science news, let's chat about the spectacular photo that was all over social media of the black hole at the center of the Milky Way. Now, to paint a picture of what the photo looked like, it was a bright ring of fire surrounded by darkness, with a shadow of a black hole inside. And that's the telltale signals of what a black hole picture looks like. This black hole is called Sagittarius A. Findings about this black hole were published in the Astrophysical Journal Letters on May 12th. And the black hole is called Sagittarius A. So how did this photo get photographed? I did a little bit of digging, and it turns out it was found by something called the Event Horizon Telescope. This same team, you may remember, released a photo of another black hole. In fact, it was the first black hole that was ever photographed in detail. This supermassive black hole is found near the center of the Milky Way, 27,000 light years away. And while it's the closest supermassive black hole to us, being that it's in our galaxy and other supermassive black holes were photographed from other galaxies, science knows very little about what's going on inside black holes because, as we'll talk, gravity is so intense that not even light can escape. In fact, nothing can escape. So the only thing we can study is the stuff that's around the black hole, not what's inside. So what gives it kind of that orange glow around the outside is very interesting. The best way to picture a black hole is think of stretchy fabric, like superhero tights, stretched over like a tire. And then in the middle of the tire, you pinch the superhero tights, like the fabric, and you pull down and down and down until like you've got this deep well. That's what a black hole is. And gas closer to the black hole, gas from neighboring stars, starts to orbit the black hole faster. And also, the gas is falling. And as things fall, they exchange gravitational energy for kinetic energy, and it gets hot. If you combine the speed of the gas going around plus the speed of the gas falling, you get hot gas. Now, the more I delved into how they got this photo, the more fantastic it is. This isn't like a telescope looked at it and somebody took a picture. The photo was created by like 3.5 petabytes of data. That is an enormous amount of information. And they've been slowly piecing together the data from infrared, from X-ray, all of these different types of wavelengths of light into a massive jumble that have been run through simulations since 2017. Now, the gas that moves around the black hole is moving very, very quickly, and it kind of ripples like waves on an ocean. And the teams that put the data together also use the flickering and frothing gas around it to help piece together the photo using microwaves. So if you're wondering why the image is kind of blurry, it's because it's constantly moving, and it was assembled with thousands and thousands of separate pieces of data. Imagine trying to take a picture of Beaker when she's beakering, but with 10,000 cameras all taking pictures from different angles in different wavelengths of light, because as Beaker moves, she changes from infrared to microwave to radio to light to gamma and back and forth. It's hard to wrap your head around how massive it is when I say supermassive, when somebody says supermassive black holes. We had on our Twitter spaces, Dr. Jan Schultz, who studies supermassive black holes, and he tried to get across just how dense these black holes are. Sagittarius A has 4 million times the mass of our sun. Some exciting news. This photo of Sagittarius A isn't going to be the last. There's more data that has been gathered since 2017, data from 2018, all the way up to 2022. And it's still waiting to be analyzed. We might get an even better picture of the black hole. So if you're wondering why it was a big deal, it's because it is. It took years to assemble the data. If you're wondering why everybody's excited, it's because black holes don't allow light to escape. So we have to look at them using other methods. And they're so mysterious. Somebody asked Dr. Schultz in that live space what he thinks is inside a black hole. And he said something that I think frustrated people. He said, "We'll never know." That's his opinion. We will never know because the gravity is so intense. What happens in a black hole stays in a black hole. And that includes any science you want to do. That's science news for this week. This week in Pet Science, let's chat pets and pot. For those of you in the States, you may have heard, or you may be in a state where marijuana is decriminalized/legalized. In Canada, it's legalized. It happened very quickly. There are marijuana stores everywhere in Red Deer where we live. There's all of these like high-end marijuana stores and low-end marijuana stores. One is called Value Buds. I just because it's legal, I've never thought, I should go pick up myself some marijuana. But it's there, and the government is making a killing from taxing it. So kind of smart on their end, in my opinion. But one of the drawbacks from having lots of marijuana supply is that maybe somebody isn't like me and they're like, it's legal now. I might as well go get some. There is potentially more hazards for pets who get into it in your house. So that's what this study looked at. 251 veterinarians were surveyed. It asked the veterinarians to respond to the number of cannabis poisonings that have gone on for years previously. The statistics bore out that there was a big jump in the number of cannabis poisoning cases in 2018, which is around the time that it was legalized in Canada. Go figure. Now, there's a bunch of other factors that could have led to that. A lot of folks use marijuana products, CBD products, for their pets for medicinal purposes. Folks use marijuana for themselves for medicinal purposes. So there may have been a bit of that mixing in as supply got better. And also, after marijuana was legalized, it was on the minds of veterinarians, so perhaps they were reporting it and thinking about it differently. What the survey also found was the most common animal that was poisoned by cannabis was dogs. Go figure, because dogs are going to eat things. There's also reports of poisoning in cats, which makes sense. Now, some of the other animals were a little out there, like iguanas. Okay, ferrets, fine. Cockatoos? I don't know if you want a cockatoo on marijuana, but anyways, those are the animals that were reported to have cannabis-induced toxicosis. Now, what are some of the symptoms of cannabis poisoning? Most of the reporting was pretty mild. Symptoms like urinary incontinence, so the animal just pees. They're a little disoriented. They have a slow heart rate or a fast heart rate. Most animals were totally fine after they were monitored. In a small number of cases in this study, some of the animals did die, which was really sad. Though it should be noted that many of the vets said there were underlying causes also in the death of the animal. So they had other conditions that may have led to the death, not necessarily just the cannabis poisoning. So from this study, one of the things that is good is that it starts to paint a picture for vets what to look for if an animal does have cannabis poisoning. Maybe before it was quite rare, then your state or all of Canada legalizes it, so supply is higher. Though there is some sociology research that goes into that legalizing drugs doesn't necessarily make people go out and want to do them. I'm case in point. But with higher supply, maybe, and society accepting it more, it becomes something like alcohol, where it's a socially acceptable drug to do. I'm all for more data to give vets more tools to help animals that may have gotten into your special brownies. So an interesting study, interesting symptoms, and hopefully we don't lose too many pets at all to this. The recommendations, if you have marijuana in your house, is to make sure it's out of the road and pets can't get into it, just like children. That's Pet Science for this week. Hey everybody, before we get to the interview section, I thought I would just give you some ideas about how you could support the Science Podcast. Number one, you could support us on Patreon. Check out patreon.com/BunsonBurner. There's multiple tiers of support, and the lowest tier of support is not much more than a cup of coffee a month. The second way is you could check out our merch shop. We've worked really hard to partner with clothing companies that do a great job of providing vibrant colors and soft feels. We also have the Beaker Stuffy for sale. It's so cute. The third way you could support us is giving us great reviews on our podcast playing apps. Any kind of review helps. And if you can't find a review, share our podcast with people. Thanks, everybody. It's time for Ask an Expert on the Science Podcast, and I have environmental scientist Ashley Parks with me today. How are you doing today, Ashley?
Hi, I'm doing quite well, thank you. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm good. I get to talk to an amazing person in science, and I get to take a break from marking tests. So this is it's a good little break. Where are you in the world? Where are you calling into the show from?
I am in Melbourne, Florida, in the U.S.
Oh, way down in Florida, hey?
Yes.
Jealous of your weather in the winter, I'll tell you that. Many Canadians make the trek down there as snowbirds. You've probably heard that before.
Yes, they sure do.
Have you lived in Florida your whole life?
I have not, actually. I grew up in Minnesota and came down to Florida when I came to college, and I have been here ever since. So I've been here for 18 years now.
Oh, okay. So it's like your home, your new home / home.
Yeah, my new home. Yeah, my second home.
Your second home.
Sure.
Okay, so you're an environmental scientist.
Yeah.
First off, what is your training to be an environmental scientist for people that are maybe wondering?
Okay. I got my undergraduate degree. I got a Bachelor of Science at Eckerd College, which is in St. Petersburg, Florida, and I studied marine science there.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And after that, I went to the University of South Florida in St. Petersburg as well. and got my master's in chemical oceanography there.
Gotcha.
And so just gaining experience there and learning what I wanted to do and work outside, and the training from school kind of led me down the path of, finding the jobs that I've had since then with working as an environmental scientist out in Florida.
So the other thing that I love talking to guests about is what led you into the path of science, like marine science and then oceanography? Like when you were little, is Minnesota by an ocean? I don't think so.
Minnesota's not by an ocean. But
I was going to say, it's kind of landlocked.
Yeah, we do have an awful lot of lakes in Minnesota.
Okay, touche.
Yes, even though it wasn't the ocean, I was always around water. My first kind of introduction to environmental science, as it were, was when I was in 6th grade. We took a field trip and we were able to do a little mini course on stream ecology.
Okay.
And so I got in the waders and the dip net, and we got in the stream.
Oh, fun.
Collecting bugs and all of that. And, I was just thinking like, how great to be able to do something like this every day, right? So I kind of knew that I wanted to go into science and be outside. And then when I was 14, I went on a trip to Thailand where I snorkeled for the first time on the coral reefs there. And that's where I really fell in love with the ocean and really decided to go down the marine science path, and specifically.
I kind of feel people have two reactions to snorkeling for the first time. This is the greatest thing ever, and I want to always be in a position to do this, and I will never go in the ocean again. I think that people have two reactions to snorkeling.
I would say that's pretty fair. Yeah. Mine was the former. Yeah.
Gotcha. I just, for the listeners, I've talked about this before. I love snorkeling, and I'm from Canada, so I don't get to snorkel that often. In the lakes that we have, it's pretty, they're pretty silty. You don't really get to see a whole lot, but I've been lucky enough to go to tropical locations, and it's like a whole other world. It's like you're in an aquarium, especially if it's tropical and by a reef. It's just wild.
Sure. Yeah, it is. It's a whole new underwater world, completely different. I think that's part of what I love about it too. Just kind of go and get away, and it just like gets you out of the reality of everyday life,
And did you have trouble clearing the water? Because that's usually what sinks people, no pun intended, is they come up and take a breath and they suck in a whole bunch of salt water.
I did. Not gonna lie, that still gets me on occasion to this day. But I'm usually pretty good at it.
So from there, you're like all in on the science, all in on the ocean. Right. Got your undergrad. What was the impetus to get your master's? Did you just want to learn more about a different area of marine science?
Yeah. So my undergraduate degree was marine science, and I focused on biology. Mm-hmm. And from there, I actually got a job with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, studying nutrients and phytoplankton as they relate to harmful algal blooms.
Oh.
And working there, made me want to advance in my field and learn more about what I was doing and get better at what I was doing so I could advance my career. And so that's actually, so I got my bachelor's, worked for a little while, then actually went back to get my master's degree, and then went on from there. And that's when I focused on chemical oceanography as a master's degree, as opposed to biology that I had focused on in undergrad, because I had started working with nutrient chemistry in the lab and got really interested in it.
So those harmful algal blooms, they're in the ocean too. Did you study them in any of the water bodies that, just bringing this back to the podcast and how we sometimes talk about animals, because there's always horror stories of dogs dying from these algal blooms.
Yeah. So the the harmful algal blooms that I focused on there were some people may have heard of the Florida red tide, causes a lot of problems. And that was, my study was in Tampa Bay and the Gulf of Mexico. There was where we focused on it. And yeah, there are often a lot of fish kills. And we've had also marine mammal deaths, dolphins, manatees, from feeding on the dead fish and just being exposed to the toxins in the water. Lake, freshwater, and those are saltwater blooms. And then, and so freshwater algae blooms that you might have, you probably where you are like blue-green algae.
Cyanobacteria.
Yep, cyanobacteria. Yep. And so, so that can be very harmful to dogs and people if they're exposed to. You don't want to go in the water when there's a big blue-green algae bloom, because the plankton produce toxins that are toxic to the people and dogs. Yeah. So if you see the typical green slime of on the surface of the water, you don't want to let your dog go swimming.
Right.
Or
A human will look
water.
at that and say, ew. But a dog is like, woohoo. Right. They love to swim.
Yeah.
And just one more follow-up question before we move on. And it's because I've talked about this on the podcast so many times in news stories, because we break down a news story every week. And just from somebody that studies it, it's the toxin that these little critters produce, right? It's not from them dying in the decay, or it's not an allergic reaction. It's like a toxin these things make.
Correct. Yes. It's the most common one is called microcystin, and
neurotoxin.
Yeah, I believe it's a neurotoxin. Yeah. And so that is what is going to affect you.
Well, good tips and good science. Thanks, Ashley. So so you worked with that, and then you got your master's. Can you talk to us about what you're doing right now? What's some of your current work as an environmental scientist?
Most of what I do right now is water quality monitoring. So I'm in Melbourne, which is over on the east coast of Florida. We're pretty much due east of Orlando. It's about an hour east of Orlando. So some people might, I think a lot of people know where Orlando is. Disney World is our
yeah.
Hey, so you're right near me. So that's where we are geographically. And so to the east of us, we have the Indian River Lagoon, which is between the mainland and the Atlantic Ocean. It's separated from the Atlantic by a series of barrier islands. And then to the west of us, we have the St. Johns River, which actually, interesting fact about the St. Johns River, it flows north.
Instead of south.
Yeah. Most, I think the Nile gets the most attention for being a river that flows north, but also the St. Johns River in Florida. So
wild.
So I get out there and collect water samples. We send them back to the lab, where the most important things that we monitor for are oxygen, chlorophyll, and dissolved nutrients, which are all related to the algae blooms that we've been seeing problems with in our lakes and rivers and the lagoon as of late. Okay,
so how does one test water quality? That's a big question, but like, do you go scoop it up and take it back to the lab? What goes on there?
Yeah, so we have some sensors that we take out with us that we just drop in the water, and those give us some immediate readings of what's there, kind of the quick and dirty way.
What do the sensors tell you?
They can measure the temperature, the salinity, how much salt is in the water. It will tell us oxygen levels, and they can also measure chlorophyll levels.
They can measure chlorophyll levels? That's wild.
Yes, very fancy probes. Yeah, they use lights that flash to excite the phytoplankton cells, which then emit at another wavelength. And then the sensor will pick up the emission of the cell as a chlorophyll reading.
That is cool.
Yes, they're
Do you wear them on a belt like Batman? Like, or are they in a box or something? Like,
hey, there we go. That could be.
like, do you have all of these different gadgets, like, on your utility belt, or like what? What's going on, Ashley?
No, they attach to what we call a sonde, which is kind of like a big stick, and they just
that's cool though. It's like a staff
into the water. Yeah. Oh, yes, our water quality staff. So we can start referring to them as that.
Right. It is the staff of science.
Ooh, I like that. That sounds much more interesting than a water quality sonde, but.
Okay, and then do you take samples back to the lab to do further analysis?
Oh yes.
Sorry, Ashley, I will constantly derail you. That's my job as a wacky host. So,
oh, no worries. As long as you help me get back to where
it's
we're
all good.
supposed
I've been
to be,
taking notes.
Once I get derailed,
I've been taking notes. It's all good.
I'm gone. Okay. So then we also collect water samples in different bottles, and we send those off to the lab, and then the lab takes the bottles, and sometimes they're filtered, and sometimes they have acid in them to preserve what they're measuring, and depending on what they're measuring for depends on what instrument that they put the water on, and then we have all kinds of different very complicated instrumentation that will take the water, run it through, and give us our results.
And does it spit you out a report, and then you're like a food critic? Like, this river is bad. This river is good, right? Like a Yelp review, 2 stars, bad service. Like, what's going on?
Yeah. So we just get just the raw data out of the instruments, and then we as scientists can take that raw data and put it into graphs and charts and analyze it, and use that to determine how the water body is doing and to help us make decisions for what to do in the future.
Now, do you like that part of your job, or is it like me as a teacher, like marking is kind of not my most favoriteest part of the job? Or do you want to say, are you going to get in trouble with your employer?
No,
like, some people love writing reports. There are scientists I talk about, and they're like, I don't even want to see the outside of a building. Give me the data and I will crunch it. Right. So.
I do kind of actually enjoy it. I just love different parts of the whole process, going out in the field and collecting the sample, and then the analysis in the lab. And then you get to take everything that you've done, and then analyzing the data and writing it up is kind of like, it's where you get to, play detective almost. Yeah. You take all of the evidence that you've collected from the different parts and put them together, and you're able to tell the story. And it's fun sometimes to see the results that you get. It can be
That's
exciting.
Different detective work than I do when I mark. I'm like, woof. My detective work is this kid does not know how to balance ion charges. What are some of the things, like, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but like, what are some things you've had to write up in a report about water quality? Like, Ashley, do these reports get used by the government or private industry to make decisions about things? Or is that the hope, or they used for further?
Yes, they do. Actually, that is the main purpose of our work. So I work for the St. Johns River Water Management District, and we are a state agency. And down here, environmental regulations are mostly handled by different state agencies, or individual counties or cities, municipalities. And so all of those decision-making agencies, mostly the government, will use data that we've collected in order to make policy decisions. So, for example, if we need to reduce nutrients to this water body, they can enact fertilizer restrictions
right, yeah.
in their cities or county. And
right, because you get that runoff from whatever's growing. I don't know much about Florida agriculture because we grow like canola and wheat up here. I don't think you grow a heck of a lot of canola in Florida, but obviously you'd get runoff can exasperate all of the little critters that use nitrogen or phosphorus or things like that.
Yes, exactly.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. Cool.
So, yeah, and the Department of Environmental Protection, or DEP in Florida, makes a lot of management decisions as well. And so we often cooperate with them. And so they're another agency that will use our data.
Interesting. So this leads to my next question, Ashley, and that is, one second, sorry. This leads to my next question, Ashley, and that is, what are some of the misconceptions about the environment that you feel the public might get wrong sometimes? Like you're in this industry all the time, or this discipline, this area of study, and you're out in the field and you're in the lab and you're crunching the numbers. What are some things that people sometimes get wrong about the environment?
I think that what people don't grasp very well is how complicated the environment as a whole actually is. So people will notice, let's say that, this lake always has algae blooms. We need to fix this right now. What can we do to fix it? And people will have ideas. Well, can't we just do this one thing and it will make everything better? And and some of these problems that we're having in the environment, the concerns that we have, are results of things that have been happening over decades, and something that takes that long to develop is going to take a long time to be able to get it back to where it was too. So we can't just make one simple change and make everything better. That one simple change might help. It might be one step of the process, but it takes a lot more than that. The environment there's so many different moving parts. It's very complicated. You have to address everything in the system as a whole and not just this one part of it.
So even something like elevated fertilizer in the water, say, there could be a dozen reasons why that's occurring. That's way more complicated than just telling the farmers to cut back on their fertilizer.
Right. Yes. And then, then you also don't want to, let's say, put all the farmers out of business either. And so it's also complicated to try to find, that middle ground of, allowing what's necessary in addition to, cutting back to help this water body recover.
Gotcha.
So there's a lot of management decisions that go into it, a lot of data collection and analysis, and that all takes a lot of time and a lot of money to implement. And so I think people just need to sometimes realize that we're working on it, and we eventually want to get there, and that's what we're working towards every day in collecting our data and working on products to help us move towards a better future, but it can't just happen overnight.
So the message is be patient and understanding, or the message is it's complicated, or a little bit of both?
Maybe a little bit of both.
It's like the Facebook relationship status. It's complicated, right? That's the environment.
Yeah. It's complicated. Yeah, maybe be patient and understanding because
There
it's
you go.
complicated.
Don't go be like, hey, why is it
Sure.
complicated? And they're like, mind your own business. It's complicated. Be
Sure.
patient. So
Yeah, and then I always encourage people to, if they have more questions about it, to reach out, to their local
right.
governments. There's a lot of citizen science projects that are happening because budgets are tight. And we are always encouraging citizens to help us with our science as volunteers and things, and that will help things move along more quickly. And, a lot of local governments have a lot of information on what you can do individually to help improve the environment around you.
Even things like citizens can take whatever, like their own samples of water, or they can measure rainfall, or there's probably even little test kits that I've heard that they can give out. You can test your own waterways for nitrates or something like that.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. Those are all things we have. Yep.
So, Ashley, before we move to the second half of the interview, can you talk to us about seagrass? You do seagrass monitoring.
I do, and that is the favorite part of my job.
All right. Well, you're going to have to tell us about this.
I will. So I actually get to snorkel for work. Yes. So we have, and this is in the Indian River Lagoon that I was telling you about. We go out on the boat, and we have about 100 transects that span the length of the lagoon, north to south, that we monitor every summer and every winter. So we go out there and we lay lines along the bottom, and we snorkel along the line. We have 1 meter by 1 meter quadrats that we carry around with us and lay down on the line on the bottom, and we count the different seagrass that we see. And we've been doing that for over 20 years now. And so we go to the same site and the same spot every time. And so we can see over time how the seagrass has changed.
How deep do you have to snorkel?
The deepest we have is just shy of 2 meters.
Okay, so you're not like free diving like 20 meters or something like.
Oh yeah.
I feel like it's kind of sketchy.
I would, yeah. Well, yeah, we would use scuba, I think, if we had to do that. But yeah, because seagrass doesn't grow that deep. It only will grow out to just about 2 meters, depending on water clarity. And so we don't have to get deeper than that because there's no grass at depths. Do
you carry around a clipboard, like an underwater clipboard, or do you just have to remember what you see? I'd be terrible at that.
Yeah. It's kind of like a clipboard. It's called a slate.
Okay.
People will use them for scuba diving sometimes. And you write on it with a pencil. It's a special type of plastic. I'm not really sure what it is. And we can write on it underwater with our pencil, and it doesn't erase until we get back and erase it.
Oh, tricky.
Yes. And so we carry that around with us as we go along. And then once we get back on the boat, we'll transfer what we wrote on the slate onto our paper data sheets.
Now, what's the importance of doing this, right? If I hear that people in Alberta are looking at grass, I'd be like, well, I think you should just ask the cows, because they kind of look at that all the time. Like, why are you doing that? But there's got to be a big reason why you have to monitor all the seagrass.
There is. So seagrass is a very important habitat for fisheries, and also an important food source for manatees. And yeah. And over the last we've had a lot of decline in our seagrass coverage. We had in the 70s, 80s, it was declining, and then we came in and made some changes, and we started to see it kind of start to grow back. And then in 2011, we had a really bad algae bloom in the lagoon. And since the bloom was so large and lasted for such a long time, it prevented light from getting to the bottom. And so the grass didn't have enough light to grow, and a lot of it died off. And we've been trying to monitor it to see if it is coming back or getting worse. It did come back for a little bit, and now we have hardly any left. And it's, gosh, this is kind of the sad part, but we've had a lot of manatees die lately because they're literally starving to death. And so we're working to see what's out there, where it is, so that we, moving forward, can try to make those policy changes to improve the water quality, to decrease those blooms, so that the seagrass can grow back, which will bring back the fish, which will bring back the manatees, and just better water quality in general.
Right. So if it's just like grass in a pasture, you don't have grass, everything that relies on it are kind of out of, they're kind of out of lunch.
Right. And actually manatees are sometimes referred to as sea cows. So you could think of the sea cows grazing on the
When you've been snorkeling, have you seen them? Like, are they all over the place? Or are they super rare?
Kind of in between. They're not really all over the place, but they're not rare either. We see them on occasion. Yeah, they are threatened. They took them off the endangered list. And they are threatened. So they were trying to bring their numbers back up, and depending on what happens, because they also need warm water. And so they tend to, we tend to have a higher mortality rate in the winter from the cold water. And so we'll see so this winter, with the cold water combined with the lack of food, we're wondering if they won't be put back on the endangered list.
That's horrible.
Which is, it's a big bummer. But that's also why the work we do is so important. We're trying to make it better because, we really want them to come back and stay around.
Yeah, it's a creature that, I've never seen one, aside from maybe I saw one in a zoo. Like, I know what they look like. I've seen them on YouTube or pictures of them, but I doubt if I've seen one in real life.
You just have to come back to Florida.
I guess it's kind of the same thing. Like, if you're from Florida, you probably have never seen a moose in real life.
Well, I am from Minnesota, which there are some moose in Minnesota, but I've still never seen one though.
I'll just say back. Well, they're not rare, but we do see them in Canada.
Yeah, right. Yeah. There we go.
So it's important work, and I'm glad we chatted about that. And for the people listening, I mean, it's just the more that the more you can partake in changing the way things are, if that's your prerogative, right? It's something to learn about.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for talking about your job with environmental chemistry and what you do with seagrass. It's interesting. We're going to switch gears a bit. The second half of the interview lets our audience get to know you more as a person outside of your career. And the first question is for you to share a pet story with us. The guests always are asked if they would like, and most say yes, to talk about a pet that they have had in their life, or they do have in their life. Do you have a pet story for us?
I do. I have 2 dogs. I have, Kona. She is a chocolate lab. And Otis, who is an Italian Greyhound mix. And they're both 13. So they're senior citizen dogs.
Okay.
And living in Florida, they don't really get to see snow ever. But one year for Christmas, we drove up to Minnesota. And they got to see snow for the first time. It was a very long car ride, And so we had to take a lot of potty breaks and treat stops, and they kept getting colder as we went north. So I think they're kind of like, what's happening here? And then I just remember the first time they went out in the snow, and at first they were unsure, but then it was their favorite thing, and just bounding through the snow and having so much fun. And my cousin was very young, and so my chocolate lab Kona, we hooked her up to the sled, and she pulled my cousin around in the sled. So that was a lot of fun.
Adorable. And the other one's a greyhound, is that correct?
Yeah.
Was it a bit too cold
Italian
for the
greyhound?
greyhound? Because they don't have a heck of a lot of anything going on in the keeping warm department.
Yeah, he shivered a little bit, and we had to put a little winter coat on him to help him while he was outside. Yeah.
Adorable.
Yeah, he much preferred being inside snuggled under the blankets.
Well, you know, like labs were bred to swim in icy lakes and retrieve ducks and things like that. So they love cold and water and wet, and snow's just frozen water, slushy water. So they're right up.
Oh yeah, there you go. Never thought of it that way. She does love to swim too. She loves to swim. Yes.
How long of a car ride is it from where you are to Minnesota? Am I thinking like it's days? Like you can't do it in one day, or if you do, it's like a long day.
Long, yeah. I think if you drive straight through, it would take you about 24 hours. So a whole day, which is what we did that time. I've driven there again and have stopped overnight and broken it up into 2 days, because that overnight section is rough. Even if you're trying to sleep and switching off with another driver, it's just, it just isn't great.
Yeah, we can get from where we live to Vancouver Island, like the westernmost part of Canada, but that is a heck of a day. Like it's like one of those days, right? So normally we break it up into 2 to get that far. So yeah. Well, I love your story. Thanks for sharing.
Oh, sure. Thanks.
The other question we asked our guests for is the super fact. And the super fact is something that you know that when you tell people kind of like blows their mind a bit. Do you have a super fact you could share with us?
I do. And it is that tunicates, or sea squirts, are the closest invertebrate relative to humans.
They're called a what? A sea squirt?
A sea squirt. Yes.
Do they actually squirt the sea, or are they like tiny, like they're squirts, like you're short?
No. Maybe a little of both. Yeah, no, they're called that. So they use siphons to filter feed. So they siphon the water in through one side, and then it goes through, and they have little parts inside that catch the food out of the water, and then the leftover water gets siphoned out through the other side. And they're if you look at it, you might think it's a sponge. It kind of almost looks like a sponge. And if you pick it up, it kind of feels like that. And if you take them out of the water, you can see them squirt water out of that siphon that they expel the waste through. So that's where they get their name. So
they're squirty squirts. They're squirty. Okay.
Yes.
And they're on the tree of life going back. They're closer to us on that tree of life than a bunch of other stuff. Wow. Okay.
Yep. Than other invertebrates. It's because they're in the same phylum as us, which is phylum Chordata. They don't have a spine like we do, but they do have a nerve cord. And so that's what puts them in phylum Chordata and makes them technically more closely related to us than any other invertebrate on the planet.
A clam.
Right.
Okay, that's good. Clams are dumb. I'm glad we're not very much related to clams, so.
Yes.
Anyways, that is a super fact. I love that. I've met some people that are closer to the sea squirt, I think, on the tree of life than maybe some other humans I've met. So I kind of get where you're coming with from there.
There we go. If somebody is just kind of sitting around not doing
Yeah.
much, yeah, just call them a sea squirt and be like a low blow.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is a super fact. I'm just tickled thinking about these little sea squirt things. I've probably seen them when I've been snorkeling, but I'm just like, whatever. I'm always on the hunt for fishes. So
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's possible you've seen it and you didn't even know that that's what it was.
The last section of the podcast is a fun one. The guests get to talk about something that they're really passionate about. We call it the important or the important to you section. And Ashley, you wanted to talk about traveling. You're passionate about travel.
I am passionate about travel. In fact, I have traveled to all 7 continents.
Okay. Now I get 6 of the 7. You got to tell us about the 7th of the 7. Because that's the one way down south, right?
Okay. It is the one way down south.
Yeah. Okay. So how? I'm just perplexed. You just because there's the average person doesn't like. You can't go to Air Canada or an analog in the States and buy a ticket to Antarctica. I don't think it's that easy.
That's true. It isn't. It interestingly enough was a winter term class that I took while in college in undergrad that went to Antarctica.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And so we flew to Argentina and took a boat from there to Antarctica. And we spent about a week and a half to 2 weeks driving around in the sea. We would take little zodiac boats to get from our big boat to shore and do some shore excursions and walk around. And we met lots of penguins and some seals.
That's cute.
So that was a lot of fun. That's my favorite place I've ever been. Okay. I would have to say.
And I'm sure like when all of this COVID stuff dies down, that's on your list to start doing traveling again. It's definitely put a damper on people's ability to pick up and go everywhere easily.
Yes, it sure has. And yes, I'm a little wanderlust right now.
You've got your bulletin. You've got a bulletin or one of those pegboardy things with like little tacks where I'm going to go here. Then you put the tack in. I've seen people do that.
Oh,
you don't? Okay.
But maybe I should get one of those. Yeah. Should maybe get one though.
All right. And speaking of some of the creatures you've met in your travels, you wanted to talk about penguins.
Yes. So I spent 6 weeks in South Africa. A while ago, I was volunteering with SANCOB, which is the South African Foundation for the Conservation of Coastal Birds. And they do seabird rescue, rehabilitation, and release. And so I was assisting with the rehabilitation of African penguins at the facility. And since then, those are my favorite birds. I have a soft spot for the African penguin. Unfortunately, they're endangered and their numbers keep going down. They're headed towards extinction, I think, within the next 35 years if things don't change. Yeah. And so it's a great organization. They're really, without them, I honestly think that those penguins would be much closer to extinction today than they already are. And so I do a lot of donating to them and participating in fundraisers, and I encourage other people to do the same.
That's such an important point. Sometimes like there's animals on this earth that are in need of human intervention because of human intervention. And what is a precipitating thing sometimes is meeting the animal for the first time, right? Because otherwise they're just like pictures on a page,
Absolutely.
and getting to see them is
Right.
way different than watching a YouTube video about it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I held those birds in my hand, got to feed them and watch them. I mean, especially when they come in and they're sick and you help them get better, and then you get to release them back into the wild. So that's just an amazing experience. And yeah, and there are a lot of zoos that have African penguins. And a lot of them will do, kind of like behind the scenes tours where you can meet penguins and things like that. So if you ever want to meet a penguin, check with your local zoo and see if they have them, or travel to South Africa and volunteer for a little while. That's always another option if you can do it.
Our local zoo in Calgary has penguins. I don't know what type of penguin they are. And the exhibit is just amazing because you walk in and you're eye level with the water and all of the penguins. So like you can see them swimming.
Oh,
it's
neat.
very cool.
Yeah.
And they have like zoo people there to make sure you don't like touch the penguin, because you're so close. You could literally touch the penguin. And
it's open that they're not behind glass.
No, they're not behind glass.
Oh,
no,
neat.
It's so cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I couldn't help it. Like a penguin was like so close to me, and it was just like doing penguin stuff in the water and looking at me. And I like reached out and touched it. And the person's like, "Don't touch the penguins." And I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. But what do you do?" It was it was a penguin. Like it was, I couldn't help it.
Right.
I couldn't help it. I felt so bad. I don't think I've told anybody this story, except maybe my wife, that I've touched the penguin at the Calgary Zoo, and I got scolded. But yeah, I just love those penguins. They're so adorable. We'll make sure that organization is in the show notes. So if people want more information or want to help, they are just one click away. Awesome, Ashley. We're at the end of our chat today. This has been so much fun. I've learned so much, and just a broad range of stuff, from technical environmental chemistry stuff to seagrass to penguin stories. Thank you thanks for being a guest today on the Science Podcast.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, I have opened up the mailbag, and if you don't know what that means, it means that I have looked on Twitter for some questions. So welcome to the mailbag with me. I just explained what the mailbag is. I messed up my rhythm. We are looking on Twitter to find some people with questions, and we'll answer them in my section of the podcast. I'll go first. The first question comes from Liz Gets to Face the IRB Now, and it's at Not Your Dear Abby. And the question is, what is a surefire way to get a reaction out of the dogs? I used to play this one specify song that would get them howling, literally. So something along those lines. Well, no song really gets them howling. Bunsen used to have a song for him about when he broke his toe. It was like, "Hey Baby," but with Bunsen breaking his toe. But how I get the dogs going crazy is I just mess with Beaker. If I like spin Beaker around, or I sort of roughhouse with Beaker, Bunsen loses his mind. He is the safety officer, and he comes over, and Beaker, I don't know why, Bunsen like saves her, and then Beaker comes over and bites Bunsen, and then starts fighting, and then they start fighting, and I don't get it. Bunsen just did Beaker a huge favor by protecting her, and she doesn't care. She just bites him.
I know she misdirects her playfulness with you right onto Bunsen's face.
Yeah. So when Adam says that she bites Bunsen, what she does is she play bites like a little piranha, and she's very happy and she's smiling, and Bunsen's smiling, and everybody's smiling, and they play and get in the way.
But Safety Officer Bunsen doesn't like Beaker getting messed with.
Okay, Mom. What is your question?
There's a couple questions on here about where do the dogs sleep, and another question about where do the dogs and Ginger sleep at night, in their beds, in the humans' beds. Beaker sleeps in our bed with us, and that's what she does. She cuddles beside me all night. Bunsen will come into the bed and then stay for a little bit, hog the whole bed, and then leave when he gets too hot. And so he'll jump down. And now with Ginger in the mix, so Beaker used to stay all night and just be comatose sleeping. Now, if there's any activity with Ginger, Beaker will jump down and find out what's going on with Ginger. So Beaker is up, down all throughout the night. If I am working late, which I do for school, the dog, both dogs and the cat sleep by me until I go to bed. And that's pretty cute.
It is pretty cute. Yeah, Bunsen sleeps by the front door usually. He sleeps right on the front door crack, like right where the mat is, I think. That's his spot. I think that's where he sleeps. Sometimes he'll sleep in the turret room.
Okay, Dad, do you have a question?
Sure. There's a question from Zelda at Humans Are Awful. So the question is, if it wasn't a Berner or a Golden, what other dog breed would you get? And that's a really good question. I think all of us probably have different answers. My heart is with Golden Retrievers. That was our first dog, Callan. And they're just, I don't know, they're so fun. And I love Bernese Mountain Dogs too. I would get another Bernese Mountain Dog in a second. I can't make another choice besides a Berner or a Golden. That's what I would still pick. What about you, Chris?
What about me? Well, once upon a time, I really wanted a Papillon. And we actually went to the dog show and looked at Papillon breeders. And then I took you to a breeder, but it actually was a Golden Retriever breeder. And that's how we got Callan. And your heart was so full. So for me, I thought I would really like the toy breed because that's the type of dog that I had growing up. We had a toy poodle. We had a Maltese. And I really like the small dog. But now that I think based on our lifestyle and our adventures, we want a really good hardy dog that can go for the walks with us. So I would probably get another Bernese Mountain Dog or a Golden Retriever just like you, Jason.
It's fun having a bear in the house.
Okay, I don't know what you guys are talking about, but there's clearly a top breed of dogs, and that's called Samoyeds. They're like big old clouds that just walk. Samoyeds are fantastic because they're just like Bunsen. They can get a little mouthy from time to time. And by that, I mean like they can start talking to you a little bit. And that's the best part of a dog sometimes. Other times it's really annoying. But they're a big old cloud. Grooming's a bit difficult, but I mean, it's manageable. But they're so fluffy and they're just a smile on a cloud. And that's it. That's why they're so great.
Very happy looking dogs, aren't they?
Very, very happy. Also, they get big like Bunsen, so it's a win-win. That's the dog that I would have picked. Okay, well, thank you for all your questions. I'm now closing up the mailbag. And I hope to see you guys on the next episode of the podcast. Hi, Bunsen. No. I can't wait to see you guys on the next episode of the podcast, where we might be doing mailbag or we might be doing story time. But yeah, bye-bye.
That's the end of another Science Podcast episode. Thanks for coming back week after week to listen to our show. Special thanks to our expert guest, Ashley Parks. I think Ashley needs to work on a utility belt for all of her gadgets. I'd also like to give a special shout out to our top tier patrons on Patreon. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. So let's give them some love. Take it away, Chris.
Anne Schlarm, Sharon Dotson, Peggy McKeel, Chris Kelly, Samantha Dodd, Debbie Anderson, Courtney Proven, Renee Hardy, Mary Ryder, Shelby Leggett, Mary Coos, Marianne McNally, Karen Beth St. George, Bianca Hyde, Julie Smith, Andrew Lynn, Elizabeth Parmenter, Sandy Breimer, Tracy Halberg, Jenny Giger, Leela Perriello, Lisa Swartz, Catherine Jordan, Donna Craig, Jody Ogren, Liz Button, Kathy Zerker, and Ben Rathert.
For science, empathy, and cuteness.
Home is with you wherever that